The signal had been playing for 347 years without stopping. Every species in the Galactic Concordance had tried to understand it. Every computer system, every algorithm, every genius mind had failed. The signal came from somewhere deep in the dead sector, a region of space so empty and dark that most ships refused to go there. But the signal kept calling, repeating its pattern every 47 hours like clockwork. Dr. Taiwan stood in the observation deck of the research station called Harmony's Edge. He was a Valkyrian, a species known across the galaxy for their brilliant minds and six-fingered hands that could operate multiple interfaces at once. His silver skin reflected the soft blue lights of the monitors around him. He had spent 20 years of his life on this signal. 20 years of failure. "Run the quantum analysis again," Taiwan said to his assistant, a young Valkyrian named Bora who had just joined the team 3 months ago. She looked tired already. Everyone who worked on the signal eventually looked tired. The computers hummed and processed. Numbers filled the screens. Mathematical formulas stretched across holographic displays that floated in the air. The signal appeared as waves of light and sound, beautiful and maddening at the same time. It had structure. It had patterns. It almost made sense, but never quite did. "The same result, Doctor," Bora said quietly. "The mathematical framework suggests intentional design, but the emotional frequency components don't match any known linguistic structure." Taiwan closed his 4 eyes and sighed. Emotional frequency components. That was the problem. The signal wasn't just math. It had something else woven into it, something that felt like feelings or emotions. But how could you decode emotions? Emotions weren't logical. They couldn't be measured properly. Most advanced species had evolved past the need for such primitive communication methods thousands of years ago. The observation deck was large and mostly empty. Only the most dedicated researchers still worked on the Signal project. Funding had been cut twice in the last decade. The Concordance Council considered it a waste of resources. But Taiwan couldn't let it go. Somewhere in that signal was a message, he knew it. He felt it in ways he couldn't explain to his purely logical colleagues. The door to the observation deck slid open. A human walked in carrying a small container of food. Her name was Nari, and she had been working on the station for 6 months. She was short compared to most species on the station, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style and brown eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something far away. Humans were still new to the Galactic Concordance. Their species had only achieved faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. Most of the older species considered them primitive and simple, useful mainly for tasks that required manual labor or basic pattern recognition. Nari had been hired as a computational specialist, which meant she did the boring work of organizing data and running routine checks on systems. "Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Taiwan," Nari said, bowing slightly in the way humans did to show respect. "I just need to run the evening diagnostic on the signal receivers." "Go ahead," Taiwan said, barely looking at her. He was focused on the screens again, trying to find something he had missed for the 10,000th time. Nari sat at her station in the corner and began typing on her console. The signal played softly through the observation deck speakers, a background sound that everyone on the station had learned to ignore. It was always there, like the hum of the air recyclers or the quiet vibration of the station's engines. But Nari didn't ignore it today. She tilted her head slightly as she worked, and after a few minutes she began to hum. It was quiet at first, just a soft sound under her breath. Her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a child. Old songs from Earth about seas and stars and lost loves. Nari wasn't thinking about the signal. She was just humming the way people do when they're alone with their thoughts. Taiwan's head snapped up. His 4 eyes opened wide. "Stop," he said. Nari's humming cut off immediately. She looked startled. "I'm sorry, Doctor. I didn't mean to disturb you." "Hum that again," Taiwan said, his voice sharp with sudden intensity. "What?" "The sound you were making." "Hum it again. Right now." Nari looked confused, but she started humming again. The same melody, the same gentle rise and fall of notes. It was simple and pretty, the kind of tune that felt comfortable and old. Taiwan's hands flew across his interface. He pulled up the signal's frequency analysis and overlaid it with a recording of Nari's humming. His breath caught. The patterns matched. Not perfectly, but the underlying structure was identical. The mathematical complexity that had confused researchers for centuries was just rhythm and melody. The emotional frequencies were harmony. Where did you learn that tune? Taewon demanded. Nari shrugged, still looking confused. I don't know. I didn't really think about it. The signal just reminded me of music from Earth, old music. My grandmother used to sing songs like this. Music, Taewon repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. His species had abandoned music 10,000 years ago. It was inefficient, emotional, imprecise. Why use music when clear data transmission was superior in every way? Bora had stopped working and was staring at them both. Doctor, are you suggesting the signal is music? Play back the last cycle, Taewon ordered. Remove all the quantum analysis filters. Just play it as raw audio. The computers obeyed. The signal filled the observation deck, louder now and clearer. Without all the processing and analysis, it sounded different. It sounded like a song. Nari stood up from her station, her eyes wide. Oh, she said softly. It's beautiful. Taewon couldn't understand her reaction. To him, it was just organized sound. But he could see the pattern now. The way the notes related to each other. The way they repeated and varied. It was a language, but not made of words. It was made of feelings and sounds that created meaning in ways his logical mind couldn't fully grasp. Can you understand it? He asked Nari. Can you tell what it means? Nari listened carefully. She closed her eyes and let the signal wash over her. After a long moment, she started humming again, matching the signal perfectly. Then she began to modify her humming, adding variations following the changes in the pattern. It's like a sea shanty, she said, mixed with a lullaby and something sad like blues music. It's calling. It's inviting someone to come somewhere. And it's lonely. It's been calling for a long time with no answer. Taewon felt something crack in his understanding of the universe. 347 years, 40 different species, the best technology in the known galaxy, all defeated by a human humming a tune while eating her dinner. Can you decode the entire message? He asked. Nari looked at him with those thoughtful brown eyes. I can try. But doctor, I'm not decoding anything. I'm just listening to music. If you want to understand it, you need to feel it, not analyze it. Feel it. The words made no sense to Taewon's rational mind, but he had spent 20 years failing with logic. Perhaps it was time to try something different. Perhaps it was time to learn from the primitive humans who still remembered how to listen with their hearts instead of just their computers. The signal played on, no longer a mystery but a song, waiting 347 years for someone who remembered how to sing. The news spread through the research station like fire through dry grass. A human had decoded the signal. The impossible signal that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for over 3 centuries had been solved by someone humming during her lunch break. Scientists from every department crowded into the observation deck, wanting to see it for themselves. Nari sat at the center of the chaos, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. She had never asked to be famous. She just liked music. Dr. Taewon stood beside her, protecting her from the crowd of curious researchers who kept asking the same questions over and over. Explain it again, demanded Dr. Hyun, the station's chief xenoanthropologist. She was a Tarlaxian, tall and thin with skin that shifted colors based on her mood. Right now she was deep purple, which meant she was skeptical. How did you decode a signal that our quantum computers couldn't break? Nari took a deep breath. She had explained this 5 times already, but Dr. Hyun still didn't seem to believe her. I didn't decode anything. The signal is music. I just recognized the pattern because humans still use music to communicate emotions and stories. Music is primitive, Hyun said flatly. My species abandoned it 12,000 years ago, when we developed direct thought language transfer. Why would an advanced civilization capable of broadcasting across the galaxy use something so inefficient? Maybe because it works? Nari suggested quietly. I mean, your direct thought language didn't help you understand the signal. Music did. The observation deck went quiet. Several scientists looked offended. Humans weren't supposed to talk back to their superiors like that. But Taewon made a sound that might have been a laugh. She's right, he said. Show them, Nari. Play the full translation. Nari had spent the last 6 hours working with the signal, breaking it down into components that made sense to her musical understanding. She had recorded herself humming different parts, identifying the melody, harmony, and rhythm. She had found repeating patterns that corresponded to what humans called verses and choruses, and slowly meaning had emerged. She touched her console and the signal began to play. But this time she had added her own voice to it, humming and singing softly to fill in the gaps. The combination created something new, something clear. The observation deck's computer translated her additions into visual data that appeared on the screens. Coordinates. A location deep in the dead sector. A timestamp showing a specific date and time, and underneath it all, an emotional context that the computers struggled to put into words but finally settled on. Invitation, gathering, remembrance. It's calling people to come together, Nari explained. Like a concert or a festival. The coordinates are the location. The timestamp is when it happens. And the emotional tone is saying that this is important, that it's been waiting a long time and that whoever comes will find something valuable. When? Taewon asked urgently. Nari checked her calculations. 17 days from now. The signal has been repeating for centuries because it's an automated invitation. It probably broadcasts the same message before every gathering. Bora, Taewon's assistant, pulled up a star chart and input the coordinates. The location that appeared made several scientists gasp. It was deep in the dead sector, in a region that had been marked as completely empty on every survey ever conducted. There's nothing there, Hyun said. We've scanned that area 100 times. Maybe we weren't looking for the right thing, Nari suggested. Maybe whatever is there only responds to the signal, or only appears at certain times. Dr. Hyun's skin shifted to orange, which meant she was thinking hard. This is impossible. The signal predates human space travel by thousands of years. How could an ancient alien civilization use a communication method that only humans understand? That question had been bothering Nari too. She had thought about it while working on the translation. Maybe it's not that only humans understand it. Maybe all species used to understand it. But most species stopped using music as they evolved. Humans are still young. We haven't gotten rid of music yet. Maybe we're not special, just less evolved. Or maybe, Taewon said slowly, other species evolved in the wrong direction. Maybe they lost something important when they abandoned emotional communication. The observation deck erupted into argument. Some scientists agreed that the translation seemed valid. Others insisted it was impossible and demanded more proof. Hyun wanted to run tests on Nari to understand how human brains processed musical information. A security officer named Dae-ho warned that the signal could be a trap set millennia ago by a hostile civilization. Dae-ho was a Korthan, a species known for their military prowess and careful thinking. He had scars on his green-scaled face from old battles. If this is an invitation, he said in his deep, rumbling voice, we need to ask who sent it and why. We don't fly into unknown space just because we received a pretty song. It's not just a pretty song, Nari said, surprising herself with her own boldness. It's a message that has been broadcasting for hundreds of years, waiting for someone to answer. Whoever sent it wanted to be found. They wanted people to come to this gathering. Or wanted people to fly into a trap, Dae-ho countered. Taewon held up his hands for silence. This decision is above our authority. We need to contact the Concordance Council and present our findings. They will decide whether to authorize an expedition. The meeting broke up slowly. Scientists returned to their departments to analyze Nari's translation from different angles. Hyun immediately began writing a report. Dae-ho contacted security headquarters to discuss the potential risks, and Nari sat alone in the observation deck, listening to the signal and wondering what she had started. The signal sounded different to her now. Before it had just been background noise. Now she could hear the loneliness in it, the hope, the patient waiting across centuries. Someone had created this song and sent it out into the void, believing that someday someone would hear it and understand. And finally someone had. Taewon returned an hour later with news. The council has agreed to a meeting. You'll need to present your findings directly to them. Nari's stomach dropped. Me? I'm just a data specialist. I'm not important enough to talk to the council. You're the only one who can explain how the translation works, Taewon said. Besides, you're more important than you think. In 6 hours you accomplished what the entire galaxy couldn't do in 3 centuries. That makes you very important indeed. 3 days later, Nari stood before the Galactic Concordance Council via holographic communication. 50 representatives from 50 different species watched her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. She was terrified, but she sang the signal anyway, explaining each part and what it meant. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then the council's speaker, An ancient being made of crystalline structures spoke in a voice like wind chimes. The Council acknowledges the validity of this translation. We authorize an expedition to investigate the coordinates. Dr. Tae-Wan will lead the scientific team. The human Nari will serve as the primary translator. Departure in 14 days. Just like that, Nari's quiet life as a background data specialist ended. She was going to the dead sector to answer a call that had been waiting for centuries, and she had no idea what they would find when they got there. The ship was called Resonance, a mid-sized exploration vessel with enough space for a small crew and enough supplies for a month-long journey. Nari stood in the docking bay and stared up at it, feeling very small and very far from home. In 2 weeks, her entire life had changed. She was no longer just a data specialist. She was an explorer, heading into the most dangerous region of known space. First time on an expedition ship? A voice asked behind her. Nari turned to see another human, a woman with short black hair and a pilot's uniform. She had the kind of confident smile that made Nari feel both better and worse at the same time. "I'm Mireille," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'll be flying this bird into the dead sector. You must be the famous Nari who solved the impossible signal." Nari shook her hand, feeling awkward. "I'm not famous. I just hummed a tune." "A tune that broke a 300-year mystery," Mireille said with a laugh. "That's pretty famous where I come from. When I heard another human was on this mission, I specifically requested to be assigned as pilot. Humans need to stick together out here. Most of these aliens still think we're primitive children playing with toys we don't understand." "Sometimes I feel like that too," Nari admitted. "Well, stop feeling like that," Mireille said firmly. "You figured out something all their fancy computers and genius brains couldn't solve. You proved that humans belong in this galaxy just as much as anyone else. Now come on, let's meet the rest of the crew." The crew was small, just 5 people total. Dr. Tae-Wan was the mission leader, responsible for all scientific aspects. Dr. Hyun had insisted on coming as the xenoanthropology expert, despite her continued skepticism about the whole mission. Dae-ho was their security officer, brought along in case they encountered hostile forces. Mireille was the pilot, and Nari was the translator. They gathered in the ship's common area for a briefing before departure. The space was functional and plain, with gray walls and simple furniture. A large screen showed their planned route into the dead sector. Tae-Wan began the briefing. "Our journey will take approximately 12 days at maximum safe speed. The dead sector is called dead for a reason. There are no stars, no planets, no detectable matter in that entire region. Navigation will be difficult because our usual reference points won't exist." "How do we navigate if there are no stars?" Nari asked. Mireille grinned, very carefully. "We'll be using quantum positioning and inertial tracking. Basically, the ship will remember where it came from and calculate where it's going, based on speed and direction. It's not perfect, but it's all we've got." Dae-ho crossed his arms, his scaled face serious. "What about the dangers?" "The dead sector isn't just empty. Ships that go in there report equipment failures, sensor malfunctions, and psychological effects on the crew. Some ships never come back at all." "We're prepared for that," Tae-Wan said, though he didn't sound entirely confident. "The ship has backup systems for all critical functions. We have supplies for twice as long as we expect to need them, and will maintain strict communication protocols with Concordance headquarters." Hyun spoke up, her skin currently a cautious yellow color. "I want it noted in the official record that I still have doubts about this entire mission. We're flying into unknown space based on the interpretation of a signal by a species that only joined the Concordance 4 decades ago. No offense to Nari, but this seems reckless." "Noted," Tae-Wan said dryly. "Any other concerns before we depart?" Nobody spoke. The briefing ended and the crew went to their stations. Nari found her quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a porthole window showing the stars outside. She sat on the bed and tried not to think about how far from Earth she was about to go. The departure was smooth. Resonance undocked from the station and began its journey toward the dead sector. For the first 3 days, everything seemed normal. Nari spent her time studying the signal, trying to understand every nuance and variation. She made recordings of herself singing different interpretations, building a library of possible meanings. Tae-Wan visited her workspace often. He had become fascinated by the concept of music as communication, and asked endless questions about how humans used it. Nari taught him about different types of songs, about how rhythm could make people want to dance, how melody could make them feel sad or happy, how harmony created richness and depth. My species used to have music, Taiwan admitted one day. Tens of thousands of years ago. I found references to it in ancient historical archives. But we considered it inefficient and abandoned it when we developed more precise language systems. Now I wonder what we lost. You can always learn again, Nari said. Music isn't gone from the universe. Humans still have it. We can share it, Taiwan tried to hum. The sound that came out was awkward and off-key, but it was an attempt. Nari smiled and hummed with him, helping him find the right notes. For a moment, a Valkyrian scientist and a human translator made music together in the middle of space, bridging thousands of years of evolutionary difference. On the fourth day, they reached the edge of the dead sector. The change was immediate and unsettling. The stars disappeared. The view from every window showed only absolute blackness. Sensor readings became erratic and unreliable. The ship's navigation system struggled to maintain their calculations. Mirei's voice came over the intercom. This is your pilot speaking. Things are about to get weird. I recommend everyone strap in and hold on to something solid. Nari made her way to the bridge, where Mirei sat at the controls looking both excited and nervous. The pilot's hands moved constantly, adjusting course, compensating for drift, fighting to keep the ship on the right path. How do you know where we're going? Nari asked. Honestly, I'm guessing half the time, Mirei admitted. The instruments are almost useless in here, but I've been thinking about what you said about following the signal like a song, so I'm trying to feel it instead of calculate it. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense to Nari. The signal gets stronger in certain directions, right? Like it has a source point? Exactly. So I'm following the music just like you did when you decoded it. Deho arrived on the bridge looking concerned. This is not proper navigation procedure. We should turn back and request better equipment. There is no better equipment, Mirei said. This is the dead sector. Normal rules don't apply here. We either trust our instincts or we give up and go home. They pressed onward. Days passed in the endless darkness. The crew grew tense. Hyun stayed in her quarters, her skin cycling through anxious colors. Taewon became obsessed with running tests and checks, looking for any clue about what they might find. Daeho patrolled the ship constantly, as if expecting an attack from the empty void. Only Mirai and Nari seemed relatively calm. They spent hours on the bridge together, listening to the signal and following its subtle variations. Nari would sing along with it, and Mirai would adjust their course based on how Nari's voice harmonized with the broadcast. It wasn't scientific. It wasn't logical, but it worked. On the 10th day, something appeared on the sensors. It was faint and difficult to read, but it was definitely there. A structure, massive and ancient, sitting alone in the absolute darkness of the dead sector. That's it, Nari whispered. That's where the signal is coming from. The crew gathered on the bridge to look at the sensor readings. Even Daeho seemed impressed. The structure was enormous, bigger than any station or ship in the Concordance. And it was old, impossibly old, built with materials and technologies that didn't match anything in their databases. I'm detecting power signatures, Taewon said, his voice shaking with excitement. It's still active. After all these centuries, it's still functioning. I'm detecting docking ports, Mirai added. They're compatible with our ship. Whoever built this expected visitors. Hyun's skin had turned bright orange, the color of intense thought. This changes everything we know about galactic history. We need to proceed very carefully. As resonance approached the ancient structure, its exterior lights suddenly activated, illuminating the darkness. The station was beautiful, built in architectural styles that predated any known civilization. And it was waiting for them, just as the signal had promised, waiting for someone who remembered how to listen to the song. The docking process was smooth, as if the ancient station had been expecting them. Resonance settled into a port designed for ships that didn't exist anymore, yet the connections fit perfectly. The station's atmosphere cycled through the airlock, and sensors confirmed it was breathable for all crew members. Life support is active, Taewon said, checking his readings with disbelief. Temperature is comfortable. Gravity is 0.9 standard. This station has been maintaining itself for thousands of years, waiting in the dark. Daeho checked his weapons and scanning equipment. I go first. Standard security protocol. If it's safe, I'll signal the rest of you. Nobody argued with him. Daeho stepped through the airlock into the station, his weapon ready. The rest of the crew watched through the camera feed on his helmet. The corridor beyond was dark for a moment. Then lights began to activate in sequence, spreading away from Daeho's position like a wave of illumination. "The station is responding to our presence," Hyun said, her skin shifting to purple with scientific fascination. "It knows we're here. It's been waiting for us," Nari said quietly. She could feel it somehow, the same way she had felt the loneliness in the signal. This place wanted visitors. It had something to show them. Daeho's voice came through the communicator. "The corridor is clear. I'm seeing what looks like a main hall ahead. You're not going to believe the size of this place." The crew suited up and followed Daeho into the station. Nari stepped through the airlock and gasped. The corridor was massive, with ceilings high enough to accommodate beings 3 times taller than any species she had ever seen. The walls were made of a material that seemed to shift colors in the light, showing patterns that might have been decorative or might have been some form of writing. They walked in silence, following the lights that continued to activate ahead of them. The station felt alive despite its age. Nari could hear a soft hum in the background, not quite the signal but related to it. A harmonic undertone that resonated through the structure itself. The main hall took her breath away. It was enormous, an amphitheater merged with an observatory. The ceiling stretched up into darkness and the floor was arranged in circles that descended toward a central platform. Thousands of beings could have gathered here once. Now it was empty except for the 5 crew members who stood at the entrance, feeling very small. "This is a performance space," Nari said with certainty. "Like a concert hall or a theater. People came here to share music." Taewon pulled out his scanning equipment and began recording everything. "The architecture predates the earliest known galactic civilizations by at least 10,000 years. This shouldn't exist. Our historical records show nothing like this." Hyun had moved to one of the walls where holographic displays were beginning to activate. Images appeared, showing brief scenes of aliens that nobody recognized. Different species, different body types, different technologies, all gathered in this hall, all doing something that looked like performance or celebration. "These species aren't in any database," Hyun said, her scientific skepticism finally cracking. "I'm looking at intelligent species that we have no record of. Species that existed before our current galactic civilization began." "What happened to them?" Mirai asked. Nobody had an answer. The holographic records continued to play, showing fragments of gatherings that must have taken place thousands of years ago. The crew watched as ancient beings shared what could only be described as music. Some used instruments that looked familiar. Others created sound through biological means. A few seemed to manipulate energy itself into musical forms. "They were all different," Nari observed, "but they all had music. They all used it to communicate and share and celebrate together." Daeho had been exploring the perimeter of the hall. He called out from near the central platform. "There's something here. Some kind of archive or database. It's covered in symbols." The crew gathered around what looked like a crystalline structure rising from the center of the platform. It pulsed with soft light, and the symbols on its surface seemed to shift and change. Taewon tried scanning it, but his equipment couldn't get a clear reading. "It's shielded somehow," he said. "I can detect energy inside, but I can't access it." Nari stepped closer to the crystal. The humming sound she had been hearing grew louder. It was definitely related to the signal, but more complex, more layered. She could hear multiple melodies woven together, harmonies that suggested depth and meaning beyond simple sound. "I think this is the archive," she said. "This is what the signal was calling us to find. All the music from all those ancient species stored here and waiting." "Waiting for what?" Mirai asked. "For someone who could still understand it," Taewon said, his voice full of wonder. "Someone who hadn't evolved past the need for music. Someone who could translate it." Nari reached out toward the crystal, not quite touching it. The light inside pulsed faster, responding to her proximity. The harmonics shifted, becoming clearer and more defined. She could almost understand them, almost hear the meaning beneath the sound. Hyun was recording everything. "This is the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history," An archive of music from civilizations that died out before our own began. The cultural and historical value is immeasurable. But we can't access it, Deho pointed out. What good is an archive if we can't read it? Nari circled the crystal, slowly, listening to the way the sound changed as she moved. There were patterns here, familiar structures that reminded her of songs she knew from Earth. Call and response, question and answer. A conversation waiting to happen. I think it wants us to sing to it, she said. Everyone stared at her. Taewon was the first to speak. Explain. The archive is testing us, Nari said, the understanding coming to her as she spoke. It was built by species that used music to communicate. It won't open for computers or logic or technology. It needs to know that music is still alive, that someone still remembers how to sing. That's absurd, Yun said automatically, but her skin had turned orange again, the color of deep thought. Although, it would make sense as a preservation method, a test to ensure that the archive only opens for a civilization that can actually understand what's inside. Mirai grinned. So Nari just needs to sing to it? Easy. She's been singing to that signal for weeks now. But Nari felt the weight of what was being asked. This wasn't just humming along to a broadcast. This was communicating with something ancient and important, proving that humanity deserved to access knowledge from civilizations that had died millennia ago. What if she got it wrong? What if her voice wasn't good enough? Taewon seemed to sense her hesitation. Nari, you've brought us this far. The signal called and you answered. The archive is doing the same thing. It's calling to you. All you need to do is answer. Nari took a deep breath. She wasn't a professional singer. She had never performed in front of anyone except her family. Her grandmother used to say she had a pretty voice, but grandmother's love made people biased. Still, this wasn't about perfection. It was about authenticity, about proving that music still lived, still mattered, still connected beings across time and space. She began to hum, softly at first. The melody came from the signal, from the harmonics she heard in the crystal, from something instinctive deep inside her. She let it flow naturally, not thinking too hard about getting it right, just feeling the music and letting it out. The crystal responded immediately. The light inside grew brighter. The harmonics aligned with her voice, creating resonance that filled the entire hall. Nari kept singing, gaining confidence as the archive accepted her offering. She added words in Korean, not because they meant anything to the archive, but because human music often had words. She sang about journeys and meetings, about old friends, gathering after long absence, about memories preserved and honored. The crystal pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then it opened. Light burst from its core, spreading through the hall in waves. Holographic displays activated all around them, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Each one showed a different recording, a different song, a different piece of music from species that no longer existed. The archive had accepted her. The last remnants of ancient galactic civilization had opened their hearts to a young human woman who remembered how to sing. The hall filled with music from civilizations that had been dead for thousands of years. Each holographic display showed a different species, a different culture, a different way of creating sound and meaning. Nari stood at the center of it all, tears running down her face as she listened to songs that nobody had heard in millennia. The crew was stunned into silence. Even Daeho had lowered his weapon, his scaled face showing something that might have been wonder. Hyun's skin cycled through colors so fast it was hard to track, emotions overwhelming her usual scientific calm. Mirai stood with her mouth open, turning slowly to take in all the displays around them. But Taewon was focused on the central crystal. There's something else, he said. The main archive is still sealed. These recordings are just the surface layer. There's more inside, but it requires something additional to access. Nari wiped her eyes and looked at the crystal. He was right. The light inside had dimmed slightly after the initial burst, settling into a waiting pattern. The holographic recordings continued to play, but the core of the archive remained locked. A new hologram appeared above the crystal, larger than the others. It showed a being unlike anything in the current galactic database, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer like water and eyes that held impossible depth. When it spoke, the sound came not as words but as musical tones that the station's systems struggled to translate into text. The translation appeared in the air. We are the first coalition. We leave this message for those who come after, for those who might remember what we have forgotten. The holographic being gestured, and images appeared around it. Civilizations rising, growing, evolving. Species becoming more advanced, more technological, more logical, and slowly, gradually, losing something essential. We evolved, the translation continued. We became efficient. We replaced emotion with data, art with algorithm, music with mathematics. We believed this was progress. We were wrong. The images showed what happened next. Communication between species becoming sterile and transactional. Cultural exchange dying out. Empathy fading. The coalition members growing apart despite their advanced technology. Unable to truly connect with each other because they had lost the language of feelings. By the time we understood our mistake, it was too late for us, the ancient being said through musical tones. But we built this archive as a warning and a gift for those who would come after. We encoded our entire history, our knowledge, our wisdom into music because music is the only language that survives when all others fail. The hologram changed, showing the construction of the station, the gathering of musical records from all coalition species, the creation of the signal that would broadcast for millennia. We designed the signal to call out when new civilizations reached a certain level of development. We hoped that by then, at least one species would still remember how to listen with their hearts as well as their minds. We hoped someone would come who could teach the galaxy to sing again. The hologram looked directly at Nari, though it had been recorded thousands of years before she was born. If you can hear this message, then you are that someone. You carry the gift we lost. You remember what we forgot. The final archive will open only for a living voice, a proof that music still lives. Sing for us. Sing for your galaxy. Sing so that our mistake need not be repeated. The hologram faded. The crew stood in silence. Finally, Hyun spoke, her voice shaking. They destroyed themselves, not through war or disaster, but by evolving away from emotion and connection. And they knew it was happening but couldn't stop it. They're trying to save us from the same fate, Taewon said quietly. Every species in the current concordance is following the same path. Becoming more logical, more efficient, abandoning art and music and emotion as primitive wastes of time. We're making the same mistake they did. Mirai looked at Nari. But humans haven't made that mistake yet. We still have music. We still create and feel and connect through art. That's why the signal called to us. That's why you could understand it when nobody else could. Nari felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was being asked to be a bridge between the dead past and the living present, to carry forward the wisdom of civilizations that had learned too late what truly mattered. To teach the galaxy how to sing. She stepped up to the crystal and placed her hand on its surface. It was warm, almost alive. The harmonics shifted, inviting her to join them. This time she didn't hesitate. She opened her mouth and sang. The song came from somewhere deep inside, from the part of her that was human and young and still believed in the power of music to change things. She sang about her grandmother's lullabies, about the first time she heard music that made her cry, about the feeling of harmony when voices joined together. She sang about loneliness and connection, about loss and hope, about the long silence of the dead sector finally broken by sound. Her voice wasn't perfect. She hit wrong notes and her breath wavered, but it was real and alive and full of emotion that no computer could replicate. The crystal responded to that authenticity, that proof that music wasn't just data but something living and vital. The archive opened completely. Light exploded from the crystal, spreading through the entire station. The holographic displays multiplied until the whole hall was filled with music from 1,000 different species across 10,000 years of history. But it wasn't just music. Embedded in every song was information, scientific knowledge, philosophical insights, historical records, warnings about mistakes to avoid, celebrations of achievements to remember. The coalition had found a way to compress their entire civilization's knowledge into musical form. Every song was also an encyclopedia, every melody a textbook, every harmony a warning or a hope for the future. Incredible, Taewon breathed. They didn't just preserve their music. They preserved everything that mattered to them, encoded in a form that could only be accessed by species that still valued emotion and art. Hyun was recording frantically, trying to capture as much as possible. This will take decades to fully translate and understand. We're looking at the complete cultural and scientific legacy of the first galactic civilization. And they're giving it to us, Mirai said. To the concordance, because they don't want us to make the same mistakes they did. But there was one final message. The crystal pulsed and a new hologram appeared, one that seemed to be recording in real time rather than playing back something ancient. It showed the crew themselves standing in the hall, and below their images text appeared in all their languages simultaneously. The archive is yours. Share it with your galaxy, learn from our mistakes, and remember always, the species that can sing together can also think together, create together, and survive together. Do not abandon music. Do not evolve past emotion. These things are not primitive. They are essential. Preserve the singers. Protect the artists. Value the dreamers. They are not less evolved than the scientists and the logicians. They are the bridge between mind and heart, between data and meaning, between mere existence and truly being alive. And to the species that still remembers how to sing, you are not behind the others. You are ahead of them, carrying forward something they have lost. Teach them. Remind them. Help them remember what it means to feel. The message ended. The crystal's light settled into a steady glow, the archive now fully accessible to anyone who approached it with genuine curiosity and respect. Nari stepped back, suddenly exhausted. Mirai caught her as she swayed, supporting her weight. You did it, the pilot said softly. You opened the greatest treasure in galactic history by just being human and singing a song. The crew spent 3 more days on the station, barely sleeping as they explored and recorded. The archive contained solutions to problems the concordants had been struggling with for centuries. Insights into xenoanthropology that rewrote textbooks and, most importantly, a warning about the cost of losing cultural connection in the pursuit of pure efficiency. When they finally returned to concordant space, they brought proof of everything they had found. The council was skeptical at first until they reviewed the recordings and realized the magnitude of the discovery. Within weeks, the archive became the most important archaeological and cultural site in the known galaxy. Nari was offered positions at a dozen prestigious institutions. She chose to establish the Institute for Cultural Preservation and Musical Understanding, dedicated to recovering the Coalition's musical records and teaching modern species how to understand them. Taewon became her co-director, a brilliant logical mind finally understanding that logic alone wasn't enough. Hyun published 17 papers on the Coalition and its fall, each one warning about the dangers of abandoning emotional and artistic expression. Her work sparked a movement across the concordance to preserve and value art forms that had been dismissed as primitive. Daeho returned to military service, but started a program teaching soldiers about the importance of cultural understanding and emotional intelligence in conflict resolution. He said if the Coalition's military had remembered how to empathize, they might not have fallen apart. Mirai kept flying, but now she carried musicians and artists between worlds, helping spread the message that humanity's primitive love of music was actually their greatest gift to the galaxy. And the signal finally stopped broadcasting. Its purpose was fulfilled. The call had been answered. The archive was open. The galaxy was learning to sing again. But on Earth, in a small house where an old woman once sang lullabies to her granddaughter, new songs were being written. Songs about journeys into darkness and discoveries in the void. Songs about ancient civilizations that left messages in music. Songs about a young woman who proved that sometimes the most important thing you can do is hum a tune and remind the universe that some things should never be forgotten. Music spread through the concordance like fire, carried by humans and taught to species that had abandoned it generations ago. It wasn't always good music. It wasn't always perfect, but it was alive and real and full of the emotion and connection that kept civilizations from falling into the same trap as the Coalition. And somewhere in the dead sector, an ancient station waited in the darkness, its archive open and its purpose fulfilled, a monument to the species that learned too late what mattered, and a gift to those who still had time to remember. The galaxy was singing again, and it would never forget the human who taught them how.